Welcome everyone to the Strong in Six traction component talk. For about the next 45 minutes, we'll be working particularly on the traction component, the final of our 6 key components. I'm Ben Berman. I'm an expert EOS implementer. I live just outside of Philly. And we'll get some muting. Yep, there we go. I live just outside of Philly, expert EOS implementer. And of course, I also run a business of my own that helps with proven processes on EOS. So I'm both an implementer and a user of EOS in my business. So I've had quite a bit of experience over the last 10 years with the traction component. So before we get to the traction component, let's just remind ourselves the 6 key components of EOS. Take it from the top, give ourselves some context. So of course, first we have the vision component, right? Your business is at the center, and the vision component is all about everyone rowing in the same direction and having a clear picture of where they're going, right? So we know where we're going, we're all rowing in that direction. I'm sure if you tuned into the earlier talk, you heard about core values and core focus and 10-year target. Now, the one thing that's going to transfer over from the vision component is rocks. They're so important that we talk about them twice, and I'm sure I'll be answering a lot of questions about those today. So broadly speaking, we're all rowing in the same direction, clear focus and clear vision for the future. We can't achieve that vision without great people. Now, great people, of course, come in 2 types. There's the right people who share your core values, the type of people you want in your business, generally speaking, and the right seats. Got to have both. So we have a sense of where we're going. Everyone is rowing in that direction, and we've got the people to get there. From there, we, of course, need strong data. It cuts through the qualitative nature of some of the people stuff and says what is actually objectively happening on the ground, which is to say the things that help you know in your business if it's healthy, if it's generating cash or impact or both, and to cut through not just what's happening today and hold people accountable, but to help you have objective, not ego-driven, not subjective items that help you peek around the corner and look at the trends in the business that help you identify where your focus should be. So we have this picture of where we're going with the vision. We've got great people who are terrific at their jobs, and we've got really strong data that's helping us see what's actually happening on the ground. What will invariably happen is we'll have this picture of where we want to be, and then what's actually happening in the business. And of course, that will help you identify issues that you might not have even known you had, right? Issues being opportunities, challenges, threats, anything that exists in the business that is worth discussion, we put it in issues. As we solve our issues, we scale by building an easy, lucrative, and fun business using process. Process being not the old standard operating material, standard operating procedure handbook that gets tossed in a drawer somewhere, but the sustainable, high-level processes that help keep everyone focused, doing the job the right way. I like to say guardrails, not railroad tracks, right? So that we don't drive the car off the cliff, but that people can innovate and work within their worlds. And then finally, traction, the one that we're here to discuss today, the getting things done, the execution, the communication, the accountability, and ultimately the thing that, in my opinion, drives the results. So Julie, my partner here on this call, will be looking at your questions. You can feel free to fire them in the chat. Also, I'm just curious to hear what brought you here today, and if you want to say where you're hailing from today, just get the conversation going. So any questions, anything you want to get out of the conversation today, let's set our intention for these next 40 some odd minutes. So feel free to just fire away in the chat when you're ready. Again, vision, people, data, issues, process, traction. Everything in your business falls in one of those 6 key components. And here, of course, we are talking about the traction component. So the traction component has 2 tools and disciplines within it. The first being rocks, and the second being the meeting pulse. So from a rocks perspective, you probably heard about them in the vision side of things. But we start with rocks to set the priorities for the business. So first, broadly speaking, we're going to set company rocks that's defined. These are the most impactful projects that are going to move the business forward over the next 90 days. Now, they don't have to take 90 days, but they're over the next 90 days. Once we've set the highest and most impactful foci for the business for the quarter, we then go to the individual rocks for each person on the leadership team. And then ultimately we migrate that down to create this 90-day world for everyone in the organization. Because research shows that if you try to set your goals purely beyond 90 days, it starts to fray at the edges, right? So I had a number of fitness clients, fitness concept clients, and they would always say, if you look at fitness programs, it'll be the 21-day body reset or the 60-day, Energizer 2000 or the 2-week guts and butts blaster, whatever they're going to call it from a marketing perspective. You're never going to see those programs last beyond 90 days because they recognize that, again, human attention just does not last that long. So we set our goals accordingly within that 90-day framework, and everything just magically falls into place. So everyone in your organization having 1 to 3 things that they're working on every 90 days crystallizes their real priorities and helps them move forward with discipline and accountability. Basically, what that creates for us, and I'll be talking about here today, is this 90-day world. It's this feeling that when in our business, we're going to put our heads down, we're going to sprint like crazy, we're going to go after our goals so that we don't get distracted. And then eventually we're going to come up. And there are 2 things that have to happen when we come up for air. The first, of course, being celebrating and reviewing what we've just done. So celebrating the wins, learning from the things we missed on, but ultimately having an endpoint that people can speak to so it doesn't feel like an endless march to nowhere. Next, we then look forward for the next 90 days and say, we're going to take our lessons, we're going to take the things and the momentum that we did from winning from our successful rocks, get on the same page, and look forward for the next 90 days. Again, you can have an endless sprint, not going to work. You'll run out of gas and lose focus. Or you can build this 90-day world using rocks and this meeting pulse that helps you have that constant just momentum over and over again that resets, refocuses, and drives you towards the ultimate goal. So I'm going to pause here. If anyone has any burning questions, Julie, anything to call out that you see? I know you're monitoring chat.
That's okay. No questions yet, Ben. Just a lot of action in the chat. Different people from Texas. We have people from Manitoba, Canada, Iowa, upstate New York. So a lot of different areas today.
Excellent. Excellent. And welcome to everyone from all over the world. So that is our broad meeting pulse. Now, within that, right, that 90-day world rather, within that we have our meeting pulse. And the idea behind a meeting pulse is it becomes this continual cadence. If we have this large chunk of time over the 90 days, we're building in these habits that help us actually hold meetings that are that much more successful, right? And what makes a great meeting is having it at the same day, same time, starting on time, and ending on time. And of course, following that same agenda. It looks like we got to mute someone on the call. But the idea here is when you have that discipline within the organization, those meetings are going to actually happen, right? I can't tell you how many times clients have said, yeah, well, we're going to try it out, but maybe we'll do it on a different day or we'll move it. We'll start here, but sometimes it'll be on Tuesdays. It'll be every 3rd Tuesday. It doesn't work. Things come up. It's just far too easy to make excuses. There's way more logistics involved than necessary. Just get it to be the time that it is, lock it in, and make it holy time. Build your week and your quarter around it. So when clients come into EOS, one of the most frequent frustrations that I hear is we have too many darn meetings. Too many meetings, hate meetings, death by meeting, doesn't work. And we actually agree, despite the fact that we're prescribing a meeting here. And the idea is we have this meeting because most meetings, if you go and sit in them, are rated about a 4 out of 10, which is clearly a failing grade. And the intent of this meeting is to make it a 10 out of 10 based on this concept that meetings should really get things done, move things forward. We learned during the pandemic, and certainly even before, that a lot of meetings that people were having could actually just be emails, right? If you're just passing along information, chances are you're wasting a whole lot of time if that's the entire intent of your meeting. So what I'm offering for you today, and I know that we have all different levels of EOS prowess here in this proverbial room with us today, is to make sure that you're locking in this meeting and doing it exactly the way that it was intended, because when it's done, it's like a great symphony. Things just happen, they fall into place, it gets everything done that needs to be done, and you leave it actually having less meetings because you're able to remove so many of these other standing meetings that ultimately serve very, very little purpose. So with that being said, kicking it off. So imagine we're coming in, it's the same day, it's the same time. We said it's a Monday at 5 o'clock my time. We just started our meeting and we need to just get our minds right. So you'll notice we're going to walk through each of these first stages, very, very short by design. Good news. What's the best thing that happened in your personal life? What's the best thing that happened in your professional life? And we go around the room, turbo mode. Now, typically this is not going off into a 14-item story that's fit for Hollywood. This is more a highlight, right? This is a, hey, my kid scored a goal, or I took an amazing vacation on the personal side. And the professional side, of course, is, I'm really glad we got that proposal out. I'm feeling really great about it, and so forth. Now, sometimes, rarely, but sometimes you'll have something that's worthy of more discussion. That's why we have 5 minutes, because we are human after all. But usually if there's something that's going to take more discussion, it's going to end up in IDS, and we'll come back to that in just a second. So we've gotten our mind right for the meeting. And again, I just want to be clear of the why behind the what here, because I don't want to just prescribe something that doesn't make sense to you. The reason we actually have you do the good news, and we do it ourselves, is because there are going to be times that you walk into that meeting on time, by the way, meaning that you're early for it. You're going to walk in that meeting and you're going to just have had a really tough conversation with an employee. Or maybe a client has sent you a complaint about something that this happened in the business. Whatever it is, maybe someone cut you off. I don't care what it is. You may come in not totally focused. You're still thinking about these other things. So scientifically, the brain science shows that if your gratitude is there, it's actually impossible for you to feel anything else in that moment. So it gives basically a segue from whatever is happening outside that meeting. Get our minds right and focused for the meeting at hand. Really powerful stuff. Subtle and seems kind of silly, but has worked time and time again. So we have our minds right. We then move to the scorecard. And the scorecard is about reviewing the scorecard. Let me say that again. It's about reviewing the scorecard, not debating what necessarily should be on it, although that can become an issue. Not filling in the scorecard. That's a waste of time. That should happen before the meeting. It's about going through the 5 to 15 numbers in your business that indicate leading indicators for success and ultimately results. When you go through those numbers, you're looking for 2 things. One, because you have a goal, because you're using a correct EOS scorecard for each week, a weekly goal, you're simply saying, did it hit? Did we hit it or did we not? If we didn't, we're going to drop it down and we're going to make it an issue, something to talk about later. Again, just 5 minutes here. We're not going into a lot of detail. It should usually be even faster. And the other reason, by the way, the other thing that you do here is we're not just looking for, is it a 0 or 1, a yes or no, if it was above the goal for the week or in line with our goal, but we're also looking at trends. So if it's trending downward, we might want to still pull that as an issue, something to talk about later. So we've gotten our minds right. We're going through our scorecard, what needs to be basically the health of the business on an objective measure. We're then looking into those rocks. And here's where things often go really wrong. People say the way it should look to start is we go through our company rocks and then we go through our individual rocks in that order because the company rocks are the most important. And we go one by one and say, are you on track? Mark, are you on track? Carla, are you on track? John, are you on track? Just picking 3 people who happen to be at the top of my screen. And they're going to go through their respective rocks. Again, company rocks first. So whatever that is. And Mark might say on track. John might say on track. Carla might say on track. But maybe we're not sure. So we'll say, you know, I actually want to talk about that rock. I have an idea. Okay, we'll drop it down. The conversation does not happen in those very short 5 minutes, because 5 will quickly come to 25. And now you've wasted a bunch of time. So we're just pulling it out. We're making sure that things are on track. And we're proactively calling out that rocks are off track. So many of my clients have gotten in the habit of saying, look, it's okay if a rock is off track. In fact, it's almost guaranteed that a rock will go off track. If you look at the flight path between a plane from New York to LA, it is only on the direct flight path to get where it's going about less than 10% of the time. Sort of how rocks go. Things, we get all excited, we set our rocks, and then life happens. So rocks will be off track quite often in most cases, and that's okay. What's not okay is on track, on track, on track, on track, on track, on track, up, end of the quarter, not done, which clearly is a less ideal outcome. So we're proactively reaching in there. We're calling out where there's opportunities to refine and get ahead of things that might get in our way. And again, not going into the details, but just identifying what it is that we need to discuss. From there, we've got our minds right. We've had the objective measures of health and success in the business every quarter, quarter in, week in and week out in the scorecard. We have our particular focus for the quarter, our projects for the quarter, our rocks on track. Then we go to headlines. And generally speaking, those headlines involve customers or employees. Such and such is doing terrific. We want to give them kudos and make sure it's discussed and everyone knows. Such and such is really struggling. We want to make sure that we support them and figure out why that's happening. You know, this customer is thrilled with us. We want to use that on all of our materials. We got to get that on our social media. We've got to send that out. Or this customer is really frustrated or at risk of becoming frustrated, and we need to discuss it. Because we operate in businesses of people, that typically covers the headlines. There's a little bit of leeway there if there's a project headline that you just want to deliver as an item to share. But again, headlines, not full body paragraphs. So this is not a politician's stump speech here. We're just looking for 1 to 2 sentences that give the heart of the issue, positive or negative. So if you just kind of step out of what we're doing here, and I'm going to have plenty of time for questions, so I just want to acknowledge that. In the first less than 20 minutes, typically, we have set ourselves up to be mentally aligned with the meeting, locked in. We've made sure that the business is healthy and the things are moving along the way they're supposed to. We've made sure our priorities are on track for the quarter, and we've made sure the most important thing, our people, are all rocking and rolling, and where they're not, it's been identified. From there, if you imagine how many meetings involve just these things, going through the scorecard, going through the project review, going through updates, we've condensed it down to less than 20 minutes. And now we go into the accountability side of things. Did you do what you said you were going to do last week? Now, a to-do in EOS land is a 1 week initiative. It takes 1 week. So if you have something that's going to take more than 1 week, I want to know what the 1 week milestone looks like to do that. All we're doing here is walking through that entire to-do list and asking, is it done or is it not done? Is it done or is it not done? If it's kind of done, it's not done. If it's almost done, it's also not done. Right? This is 0 or 1, truly. And it's okay if it's not, because we're going to talk about it. But our intent here, and really a great indicator, is if you are not getting 90+% of these to-dos every week rolling off your list, that is the issue in of itself. Nothing is more important than your inability to accurately commit and predict to getting those things done week to week, because those are the smallest possible building blocks that you're building out that get bigger things done, that get your scorecard on track, that get your people happy internally and externally, that get your rocks done. So if you're seeing 50%, yeah, we'll just roll it over the next week, that is a burning 5 alarm. Call it out. It's an issue in of itself. And we've got to say, hey, what's going on here? Why is this to-do not done? Why is our to-do list so not getting? Are we predicting incorrectly? Are we setting things that are beyond the scope of a week? Are we just kind of talking about things we don't really care about and we're just pretending to care about them, all of those we can get to more detail in the Q&A. But most importantly, it is not a discussion. It is not a defense. The only conversation is, did you do it or did you not do it? Did you get your to do to done? Fully to done, 100%, not 99.9. Any questions here? Julie, anything?
We have two questions in the chat, Ben. Do you want those now?
Yeah, I think that we'll take them throughout. We're almost through the material, and then we'll open up and answer all the questions you guys have.
Okay.
So what do you got?
Okay, so I have a question from Debbie. Is the
Mhm.
weekly meeting the only meeting we, as in the leadership team, should need in a week? As the integrator, I tend to have a one-on-one with my leaders for a more in-depth update on what is happening with their departments.
So we run into this in implementations all the time. And it depends on what your focus of the one-on-one is. Now, I'm going to say something and then I'll give the caveat. So the first is, by design, the level 10 should be one of a very few meetings that you should have on a standing basis. What I mean by that is, if we're doing this correctly and we're setting our to-dos, if you have a particular need to talk to someone about something, that can certainly be assigned and defined in the level 10. What we're trying to avoid is having all those meetings that sort of stand there, they're there. And yeah, it's obviously you're going to fill the time because the time is there. But if you could work to have that happen less frequently and then go as needed, you're going to free up a whole bunch of time in the organization. Debbie, is that you? I see you leaning in. Is that you? Okay, great. So does that answer your question at a high level as far as the one-on-ones?
Yeah, I suppose there's just some things that do require just a little bit more time than what we generally tend to have in that meeting, right? Like, or they're like asking for, there's something specific maybe to do with the project or whatever that we just, maybe it's like it is like not in the top three, if you like, of our IDS and we don't get to it or whatever, but it's something that's still fairly urgent with regards to that week and we can get there. It's kind of
Sure.
why we have to get to it before next week or whatever that may be.
So this is probably an onion that we can't fully peel back. And if you want to follow up with me, I'd be happy to discuss further. But I will give you just some 9 times out of 10 what I've seen happen. Now, first of all, you want to make sure you separately have an integrator and visionary same page meeting at whatever cadence you're meant to have. That's a separate meeting that exists, and that's certainly a one-on-one we condone.
Yeah.
A lot of times that we find those one-on-ones tend to be either someone not willing to let go of the vine because there's just they want to keep control, or root cause beyond that might be they don't fully trust the team to go do it on their own. So we're sort of making up for that gap. Again, not saying that's exactly the situation. We can discuss it further if we have the time. But usually the need to do the one-on-ones can be a symptom of something greater, particularly if they have to happen every single week. Particularly, by the way, if you've rolled out the level 10 to multiple departments, there should be a place the issue goes to the department many times, and their to-do is to come back and let you know how they dealt with it. If they're making a catastrophic mistake, we can always work in the, following on as the integrator to make sure that that doesn't happen.
Okay.
So again, feel free to reach out to me if you'd like. But yeah, I think that's enough of the onion for today, and we can come back at the end of one more time. Julie, what else?
Next question is from Valerie. If rocks are consistently off track, doesn't that make them less effective? Or should they always be a little higher than our grasp?
So we set our rocks to hit them. I don't mean to say that rocks should not be done in the time frame we've allocated for them. And feel free to unmute yourself if you want to ask a follow-up question. What I mean to say is necessarily in the real world, your rocks rarely will be completely on track for the whole quarter because it's just the nature of there's that 80% we can predict and that 20% that's going to take us by surprise. My point is not that they should be consistently off track and not get done. That's beyond your reach. And that's creating a culture of almost, and your almost might be different than my almost, which creates exactly zero clarity. On the other hand, I'm just pointing out that if there is space, and frankly, I want to create, and I would imagine you would want to create an environment where people can raise their hand and freely say it's off track. People should not be ashamed to admit that something's off track because that's saying, hey, it's off track. and here's what my plan is to get it back on track, or here's the resource I need from you, other leadership team member, in order to get it back on track. What we're trying to do is normalize that process such that the rocks get done, fully done, 100%, crossing our T's and dotting our I's by the time allocated for it. So hopefully that creates clarity there. If you have a follow-on question, feel free to unmute or put it in the chat.
What about the scorecard? What if you're consistently not making the goals in the scorecard, and how does that reflect or create or decrease motivation?
I would say it very much decreases motivation. And the kind of how you deal with that depends on a number of things. The first is the scorecard, is the weekly goal legitimately possible? Sometimes I see people put a goal out there that's like, oh, we want to get to here. Well, that's nice, but we're going to be adjusting those goals every quarter. So let's put it based on what we can get to this quarter. What I don't want you to be, because a lot of times there's that conditional formatting where it's green or red, or, you know, on track or off track. What I don't want the team to be is continually seeing a number that's off track and then it just becomes desensitized. That's what we want to avoid. On the flip side, right, there will be some that start off track, and as long as you're making an issue and genuinely putting the intention there to get it back on track, it's okay. Those numbers may go off track at times. That's why they're there sort of as an alarm system to call it out. If you're really getting to the root cause, it should go away over the course of time. If you've done the things that you thought would get them back on track and it's still sitting there red, not done, then we have to go and examine what the real root cause is, and it might be a couple layers deep. So certainly, thank you, Valerie, for the thoughtful question, and regards to Hawaii from here, because it's getting chilly. But yes, we do not want people to be desensitized to it. And at the same time, we want to be IDSing it when it's happening. From there, again, if you're early on in your EOS journey, for those of you who are on the call, some of those numbers are going to be off track in the beginning. Just take it as an issue, talk about if it's the right number, fix the goal. I don't want you changing the goalpost, but if you're super early on, like first few months of EOS, there's going to be a lot of horse trading for what should be on that scorecard or not. And that, of course, can be something that gets dropped down to IDS as well. So we've walked through the beginning. If you just kind of recap where we're at in the meeting, we've got 25 minutes absolute max. Rarely does it take 25 minutes, but 25 minutes absolute max, right? 5 for each of these 5 sections. And we dive into IDS. What that means here is that issues list that we intend to identify, discuss, and solve is comprised of the following things. It's comprised of any issues that have come out and been identified, rarely, but sometimes at good news, right? Maybe it's coming out of scorecard, rocks, customer employee headlines, and certainly the to-do list, whether it was done or there might be further discussion that's needed. That's coming from all the issues that you have from last week, and it's coming from any other issues that just happen to pop up. What I mean by that is, before you even read that list, what I want, whoever's running the meeting should take those issues that have all been dropped down to the issues list and carried over from the previous meeting. And then people have been able to add in. And the question is, before we dive into this, does anyone have any other issues? Sometimes those are shares that people think of. Hey, I just have an informational one. Sometimes those are new issues that just haven't been captured by the other stuff. Whatever it is, we want to get that entire list. Sometimes that list is going to be 15 items. Sometimes, rarely, it'll get up to 50. But the intent here, and this is so important, read the entire list before you start diving in. Read the entire list before you start diving in. And the reason we do that is we don't want recency bias to take hold. We don't want to say, oh, we just talked about those rocks, let's talk about that. The biggest issue in your business may not be that. It may be something that carried over from the previous week. And to the question from before, we want to make sure that we still have eyes toward it and are looking at it to rank that issue. What's number 1? What's number 2? What's number 3? And we're solving issues. We don't want to play with our food, but we want to get a sense for everything that's on our plate. What I mean by I don't want to play with our food is sometimes you get teams that start ranking all the issues in tier 1 and tier 2. Overkill, right? If you see an issue that pops out to you, get it out there. Number 1, that's the first thing we're going to talk about. Number 2, that's the second thing. Next nomination is 3, and then dive in and solve issues. because meetings are meant like level 10 meetings that are 10 out of 10 are issues that are meetings that solve issues. So we want to get you spending as much time solving those issues as possible. You're going to have 60 minutes of IDS. I imagine there'll be some questions there, but again, we nominate those issues. We fight to the root cause, identifying the real root cause. We briefly discuss the issue, right? Just like what are our options here? No politicking. So usually it's once around the room or whatever. You don't want to see repetitiveness. Once the issues are on the table, we've gotten to the root issue, we have our potential solutions, and then we go to solve it. What is the action we're going to take to solve it for good? What is the action we're going to take to solve it for good? Now, that might be solve the burning need right now and solve the underlying cause simultaneously. Now, sometimes you're going to go through that issues list and you're going to see that issue that's carried over for 4 weeks. It's not really important. It's not really urgent. It's just sitting there. As a cleanup, you might want to, if you have 50 items, you might take the first IDS item and let that be, clean up the issues list and go through and see what is something that's really going to happen this quarter and what's something that should be on your long-term issues list, right? Because if it's sitting there for 4 or 5 weeks, it's really not on the same level. It's crowding that list. It's wasting your time when you go through it. Get it to a long-term issues list and consider it as a rock or a focus for the upcoming quarter. This is the meat of the meeting. I'll say again, from an IDS perspective, from my identify, discuss, and solve perspective, you really want to be, if we have 10 minutes to solve an issue, we want to spend 8 of them getting to the root cause, a minute going around the room just to see what our potential solves are that we've figured out based on that identification, and about 1 minute solving the issue. Okay, here's what we're going to do, clearly captured, and going and executing. Now, obviously, I'm being a little facetious about the 10 minutes, 8, 1, and 1, but roughly, if you're looking at how the average of IDS works, it's pretty much how it should shake out. So we work our way through the issues list, and now we're to the conclude. And the conclude is vital, because in the conclude, there are 3 things we do to make sure that accountability and clarity is reached. Number 1, we make sure the to-do list is double opted into. What I mean by that is you're going to walk through out loud all the to-dos that have been captured, all the things that have been committed to for this upcoming week. Now, we talked before about how those to-dos actually need to get to done. So this is not a rote reading and you're just going to, well, here's what they're going to do this and they're going to do this, and you're just reading it for the sake of reading it. This is an active read, which means, this is why it's 5 minutes. You are listening for, you know what, I'm going to actually be out for 3 days next week. Can we adjust that to do, because I'm not going to be able to get it done, right? So there is an adjustment that happens at this period where necessary. That's why you're recapping the to-do list. And you're also making sure people say out loud, yep, got it. Because maybe they said they got it. At this point, make sure that they got it. They've confirmed that they got it, and it's gone to their personal to-do list to make sure it gets done for the upcoming week. So we've recapped the to-do list. We've got people to double opt in and adjust to-dos where necessary. Don't get into a whole conversation. Usually, if you're done your job, it'll be very quick what the adjustment looks like. We're going to talk about any cascading messages, which, back to that one-on-one issue. Are there any issues that we need to take from this meeting and put into another meeting or tell someone else about? We've got a new policy change. We're going to be rolling out a discount. We're going to be doing whatever that is. This is your way to make sure that those meetings talk to one another and that anything that happened doesn't stay in the ivory tower of the leadership team or the respective team that's running the level 10. What do we need to tell other people that they might not know that we decided on in this meeting? Who's going to tell them? How are they going to tell them? When are they going to tell them? And the beauty of this is it prevents that, I don't like what mom said, so I'm going to go to dad and try to get another answer, right? That end around that we're trying to avoid. This ensures that the other leadership team members either know what the answer is or say, hey, don't ask me, ask Julie. Julie's in charge of questions. If you have questions, go to Julie because she owns that. So it gets really clear accountability to opt in again and get clarity again about who's going to be messaging what, so you don't get that he said, she said about what can be done. Because when mom and dad give different answers, or in your case, it's different leadership team, who sometimes could be mom or dad, depending on the family businesses listening, when they give different answers, that's when chaos happens. Because the leadership team members end up fighting with one another, and the person receiving the information has just created total chaos. Finally, to close out the meeting, so we've made sure that the to-dos are locked in, double opted in and refined. We've gotten our clear cascading message so that other people are hearing about what they need to hear about. Now we're going to jump in and we're going to rate the meeting. People often say, how do we rate the meeting? Well, I would take you back to where we are here, right? Same day, same time, start on time, end on time, follow the agenda, solve major issues. That's what a 10 looks like. Now, if we have any accountants or engineers or perfectionists listening, I have heard a lot of times, some knowing nods from the people with video on, right? Well, nothing is a 10. Nope, that's not true. Nothing is at 100. We're rating it out of 10. And yes, it can be a 10 because it's called a level 10 meeting. And you're doing something, even if it's tongue in cheek. I had on one of my leadership teams I was working with, a Marine drill sergeant, okay, pretty tough guy. And I was able to break him of that notion. So I assure you, if he is given in, you should probably too. And what I mean by that is, if you are not being at least willing to rate something a 10, you're basically telling your team that there's never going to be a satisfactory work. There's never going to be a level that's worthy of really celebrating because you've done the work to get it done. So I would ask you to consider not what it means for you, because you could be a perfectionist in your own life, but what it means to your team and the message you're sending to your team if you refuse to ever rate something a 10. And again, accountants, engineers, and super perfectionists among you, I would just ask you, out of 12, how do we do out of 10? If that's going to make you feel better. Anyway, that sort of wraps up the major pieces of the traction component. And we're going to get our rocks done, right? Our priorities for the quarter, setting it out, getting them done, coming at the end of the quarter, setting them to hit them, learning from what we were able to basically do or not do, right? Learning from the things we missed on, celebrating like crazy on the things we did because we want to build that culture within, having that consistent meeting pulse weekly and quarterly such that everyone just has this heartbeat. They understand, they know what to expect. It's predictable. It creates calm in the organization and it creates pace, right? So you're stepping out of it, you're looking ahead, you're setting a priority, and then you're executing week to week to week. With this, if you think about the traction component broadly, this is the vehicle by which you're able to effectuate all the things that you've discussed in the other 6 key components. Said a different way, this is how you make sure those things are actually getting done. This is where the rubber hits the road. It's where you achieve real traction. So you may be very strong in the other 6 components, but if you can't hold people accountable through your primary mechanism of setting priorities and setting communication, accountability, and discipline, then you're not really getting what you can from your business. And certainly, I want you to do more. So that is all. I'm going to open up for questions here. Thank you, Valerie. Appreciate the wave and the questions. Julie, tell me what we've got. And
yes. So we have another question from Debbie. I think you hit this, Ben, but just making sure Debbie is solved in
Please.
regards to do. What about
Yes.
those issues that cannot be resolved in 1 week?
I should have said that because it's such a common question. My fault. I'll own it. So yes, an issue that can't be solved in 1 week. A lot of issues can't be solved in 1 week. In fact, we already know there's a whole suite of them because we set our rocks to them, right? Ultimately, rocks are solving issues. Issues are opportunities, challenges, what have you. What happens, I'll answer the first question, and if I may, I'll answer sort of the deeper question of what I've seen happen a lot. So the first question is, just simply put, I want you to try to get good at creating milestones that get them done, right? So maybe we have something that's going to take a month. What's the 1 week version of progress? How do we know that we have momentum and we've gotten to a place that we can reasonably predict it will be done in the time that's going to take? Let's call it 4 weeks, right? What's the 1 week version of that? What's the, meet with this person, create the plan, share, whatever that looks like, make sure that that's what people are committing to, because far too long, I've seen so many people set these project-sized plans, but then it doesn't get done. And it's like, well, I made progress. Well, that's great. And we want to celebrate that. So let's actually commit to doing the things that we said such that they can get everyone thinking. And oh, by the way, it might just help you get rid of some of those one-on-ones because people are great predictors. Okay. Now, the second part of that question that I don't know if you were going here, but I'll just share where people's heads tend to get a little bit fuzzy is, okay, so we've set our rocks, it's a quarter in, maybe, or sorry, it's a month and a half in, we're midway through the quarter, and we realize, oh man, we totally missed, there's this whole new thing that's changed the game, right? Not that that happened in the last 2 or 3 years, no big changes in the world that we had to deal with. So when those things happen, or obviously much smaller, the intent is, once again, we're going to add it as an issue. We're going to make to-dos to create momentum on it. And we also might make it a long-term issue because we know it could become a rock. So we're doing the things that we can based on the time frame week to week, and we're capturing it so that we don't lose it as a rock for the upcoming quarter. That way you can breathe easy. You don't have to try to remember that it's going to become a rock. You have that momentum. The reason why we don't create a rock mid-quarter, except in extremely unique circumstances, extremely unique, is we have to make sure that at the end of the quarter, we are building the habit of predicting moving forward. Now, some quarters, and you know, for my real estate clients who are on here, particularly those in the United States, the rates environment, I was speaking to a client yesterday, the rates environment is changing rapidly, which means things that they had as assumptions for their rocks have changed. Well, two things about that. Number one is the content, the spirit of those rocks haven't changed. And number two, they're able to still work around it by setting the focus for the upcoming week to deal with what's right in front of them and getting ahead of it without throwing out the entire rocks from the beginning. Because there's still value in that exercise at the end of the quarter saying, here's what we thought it was. Here's what's happened. How do we prevent ourselves from mispredicting or getting blindsided by this in the future? Now, if you're changing your rocks midway through the quarter, you have an imprecise sample, and you're just going to build the habit of changing your rocks constantly, to which point you're just not actually having rocks, and then you're just kind of building that constantly changing habit. So in very rare cases, you might find a different rock, but the other kind of rationale behind it is you're going to have all these things, we've committed to them, we know they're super important, and then something else comes and it distracts you, and then you don't get those important things done because you've tried to do everything. Whereas looking at those rocks, provided that it's not a catastrophic change in the way the business is running, and then adding, you know, we think about our rocks going into a jar, our rocks go first, then the pebbles, that might be, the next thing would be a pebble that filters in, then the sand. If you fill it with sand, you're never going to get to the pebbles in the rock because they're simply not going to fit. Okay, what else?
Okay, next question, Ben, from Katie Johnson.
Mhm.
Should the visionary and integrator have separate one-on-one meetings periodically?
Yes, we call those same page meetings. And a lot of that is about getting clear on the vision and being aligned in the level 10. So it's not that they can't disagree, because they should challenge each other healthily. But sometimes there creates an unnecessary tension when those conversations are not happening, particularly when the visionary has a new idea that they want to set forth for the organization. So if you want to get into that, I would recommend if you go to, Julie, is it Rocket Fuel University? Is that the URL?
Yes, yep, I can put the link in the chat as well.
Perfect. And they'll give you the breakdown of how to do that. But broadly speaking, yes, that happens weekly or monthly. And it's depending on the integrator visionary duo. I will say, by the way, though, because I thought this was going to be the question, we tend to, if the visionary only sits in the visionary seat, this is going to be a big relief for many of you visionaries out there. They probably shouldn't have rocks because they usually don't get them done. And we don't want to get used to, like, the scorecard, those rock. And that's not saying that visionaries are not vital to rock completion. In fact, they are. They are the SWAT team that is able to ideate and problem solve and think through things where other people have issues with their rocks. We want to keep them free to do their job in their highest and best use, and not set the standard when they tend to not be getting those things done. So again, we're setting our rocks to hit them. We're setting our to-dos to hit them. We're making sure that they're getting done. To do, to done, rocks fully done, not almost done. So 2 questions in one there. What else do we have?
Great question from Debbie here. She says, as the integrator, I run the meeting, but I also am the timekeeper and responsible for adding the to-dos to the list.
Yes.
Can these roles be shared between the leadership team, or should it be the integrator that is driving all of this?
Delegate and elevate. Yes. So a couple things there. One is we found that oftentimes the timekeeper or the scribe can be someone else just to keep things moving. And then for those of you who, and if you're on here and you're very experienced, and this is a caveat, very experienced, so at least a year into an implementation with an implementer, you might consider passing around ownership of the level 10. Like someone runs at a different time. That is if you need to, if you want to freshen up, if you want to kind of inject some newness to it, that is not a recommended path. It's just something if you choose to. So the short answer is yes, you can and probably should. If you're having trouble juggling it and are running out of arms to do all those things, it's slowing it down. And if you're really expert at it, you might experiment with having other people run it, but that is an option, not a recommendation.
Thank you.
Of course.
And Ben, that's it for now. No further questions at this point.
Okay, so I'm gonna just give a 30-second break for any stragglers who've been thinking, not sure if they should ask the question. You don't have to speak. You could just put it in the chat and I'll answer it best. Otherwise, we'll give you 14 minutes back in your day.
Ben,
All right.
can you hear me?
Now I can.
I just had a quick question. I thought it may be easier to say instead of chat.
Yes.
See, we had a situation where something kind of came up as, I would say, a priority from employee survey results. And we had already established our rocks for the quarter. And so what I've been doing, it is a larger one. And so instead of creating a late rock, I decided to chop it up into dues. And so is that pretty typical? I mean, do you suggest doing something else, or what I'm doing is just week by week to traction to complete and move it forward?
Yes. And when did you discover it? Was it like a week or two after, or it happened?
It was like it was probably like 3 weeks after when we got the results back, and we're like, okay, I got to move on this, but I don't want to wait till next quarter.
Yeah, you're probably doing it the right way. If there's a larger sort of, you anticipate it becoming a rock in the future quarter, then you would grab it as a long-term issue as well. But again, just because that's important doesn't necessarily mean that the other rocks have become unimportant. So in order to keep the focus on those and get what's done, because rocks are not going to be the only thing that you have to do in your business, I would make that a to-do with 1 week milestones and work on it accordingly. I would also, because I can't help myself but push you, see if you could get those results heading into your quarterly when you're setting your rocks moving forward. But that's more of a general pulsing thing that you'll be able to get to.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
We have one more, Ben. We just had an ad from Ashley. At what point should you start having departmental L10s with departmental scorecards versus just the leadership team weekly L10s and company-wide on the business rocks?
Yeah, so at what point? I mean, the easy answer is if you're doing an implementation with an implementer, which if you want to really get this nailed, I would recommend you do. And we don't have people roll things out until after vision building day 2, meaning that they've gotten 3 full bites out of these particularly for rocks in level 10, 3, like they're 2 to 3 months in and have had quite a bit of focus on it. So I would say you would hold off on it. But if you've been going for a long time and you really feel like you've nailed the level 10, the intent is, remember, you go every level, there's like a 30 to 45% drop, almost like if you remember the childhood game of Operator. So you have to be really good at it to make sure that you're going to be able to purely do it to the next level. Otherwise, it starts to dissolve in terms of like purity and effectiveness as it works its way down. That being said, if you are there, by all means do so. And that level 10 should include scorecards, should include rocks. And then I'll just tie it together for, again, the question that I think comes out of that, if I may, which is, so how do company rocks and leadership team individual rocks compare to department rocks and individual rocks the levels down? And you think of them sort of as like almost like a Venn diagram or a pyramid. So at the highest level, we have the company rocks. Those company rocks are the most important things most important things, most impactful for the company. Then below that, obviously you have leadership team rocks, which are individual, but usually are department level rocks, because usually if you're on the leadership team, you own it at the department level. And then when you're going to other people in those departments, those rocks, the first look is what can they do to help support the company initiatives. That's how we get alignment. That's how they feel like they're a part of it. Now, a little advanced trick as far as timing, their rocks should be after you guys set your rocks on the leadership team. And then of course do before, so you have room at either end to get clarity on what it should be, communicate that, and make sure if they're doing a rock that supports a leadership team owned company rock, that you have the authority and accountability and time to make sure you can tie it down and get it going fully done. Usually they're just going to own a part of it. Additionally, department rocks are going to be focused on the department. So there will be things that contribute to the greater whole, the greater company rocks, and sometimes there'll be things that are just specific to the department or person, and that's right as well. It's a first look type of thing. How do we drive it up to the top? And then, of course, anything that's needed. Now, on the scorecards, it's a similar concept. Usually, if you're doing your scorecard right at the leadership team level, it's almost like you've zoomed into a department and now you're getting more specific data that gives you some leading indicators all the way down to every single person having a number. So John, I see you nodding your head. It's the same concept throughout. It all rolls from the vision. It all rolls from the rocks, from the scorecard. They are meant to roll up. But again, on the scorecard level, you're going to have some details that are just not relevant at the leadership team level, that are a little bit more in the weeds, but still, of course, ultimately contribute to the success of the department and thus the company. So I would say if you're expert level, Ashley, go for it. If you're not quite sure, have a conversation about that if you kind of want to talk it through. But I think, you know, our core values in EOS are help first. So if you have follow-on questions, feel free to contact me. I'm happy to talk you through any of these issues. Thank you, Ashley. So again, any stragglers here, feel free one more time, and then we're off to the races. Again, I'll put my email in the chat. If you have questions about anything I've discussed or beyond, Julie beat me to it because she's amazing. Excellent. I'm so glad. Feel free to fire away if you'd like. And with that, I think we will give you 8 minutes back in your day. Go have a terrific day, whatever time zone you're in. Feel free, like I said, to reach out proactively.
Thanks,
Ben.
Marco.
Thank you, everyone.